everyone. Welcome to another episode of UX Pathways. And I have the just grand pleasure of being here with Lou Rosenfeld. Lou, how are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm sitting in my office in near Wall Street in New York City, and it's cold and sunny, which is the way I like it. So I'm very happy.
Hustling and bustling out there.
That's right.
Well, I've been a fan of yours for many years, and I'm really excited to have you on the podcast today. But before we dive in it, could you just give me a little snippet of what your current role is in the industry and talk about your journey?
Sure. Well, what I do and have been doing for most of the last 20 years is serving as a combination gatekeeper and convener in the UX world. So my company, Rosenfeld Media, I think we're pretty much if not the last, one of the last companies that is really focused just on UX in terms of books, publishing books and producing conferences and doing more than those two things. But that's what most people know us for. We publish UX books. We produce 4 conferences a year, and I say gatekeeper because actually, I'm really kind of sensitive about that because we are in a really interesting position where we do have a role in deciding what we think is really important for the field in terms of what books get published, what conferences we produce, and who speaks at them. And so we try to be really careful about not just going by who's in my personal network. We try to really put it out there who's going to be whose voices are going to get heard. And I also say convener because that's just what I like doing. I like getting people together and getting out of the way, whether it's having them put together a conference program or a team of people, both author and in-house working on a book or something else. That's my happy place. Get them together and then step back and watch magical things happen.
And you have done that. I've had the opportunity to speak at one of your conferences. I've been to plenty of them, and I know you've had a lot of great authors that I share on my mantle across from me
Thank
that
you.
I read those books, and they've been references and guides to really assist others to understand the importance of user experience. And I got to tell you, Lou, it's been interesting. I like how you talk about getting people together because this group that we talk about a lot when it comes to user experience, many seem to come into it from different ways. I mean, I've had
Mhm.
people that have said, I was an educator and now all I do is accessibility. We've had on program and we had a lot of people come from different ways. What was your background? How did you stumble into this field?
Oh yeah. So I mean, I'm 60 and I've been doing UX for close to 35 years in one way or another. We just didn't call it that initially. So I came out of information science and library studies, where I was at the University of Michigan, and in the late 80s, early 90s, I got a master's and did a lot of PhD work there and worked at that program. A lot of what I was doing was teaching people very early on how to use the internet before there was the web, before there was a lot of things that are actually a lot that we take for granted, but make that experience a lot easier. I mean, when I got started, we were still debating whether or not the internet would be used for commercial activity, which is pretty wild to look back on that in hindsight. I left that environment because I had already started a business that was training people how to use the internet and it was growing, and I had to really choose between that business and staying in the doctoral program. So I figured, I could always come back, and that's been 31 years now. I probably too late for me to go back and get my PhD. But I had my company really kind of quickly morphed into a company that did information architecture. And that was what I'm probably best known for, at least was. First half of my career was really trying to get IA established and to bring principles of information science and librarianship into the information revolution we were seeing on the web by way of this framing of information architecture. So with Peter Morville, I co-wrote the O'Reilly book called the Polar Bear Book informally. It's in 4 editions now. Uh, Started the first IA Summit conference, programmed those back in 99, 2000, was very involved in the community, just really without realizing it was moving very quickly from being a practitioner to kind of a more of a community guy, a convener, like I said, and ultimately a gatekeeper. So the transition from that world to what I do now is basically, listen, Mark, I'm not much of a designer. I really am not. I'm not much of a practitioner. But what I'm really good at is trying to bring people together and get them to create content together. And that's my, like I said, my happy place. And that's my journey, and probably 10 times longer than the listener really wanted to hear. But so be it.
Well, when my ears perked up when you said the polar bear book, as I first, oh my gosh, I mean, that book, so many came together around that. And it's interesting how even when you wrote that book, it brought people together because it was a common language. So it is interesting how
Exactly.
even though your career went one way, it did start out by bringing people together as well. And for me, it's yeah, I had a similar journey, but what I think is fascinating is that user experience, it kind of gets thrown out there a lot. I've seen it. You talked about information architecture and the importance of that. And I also went down the library science route as well. And now
I didn't know
everyone,
that. That's great.
yeah, they just kind of take, yeah, it's been fun because it's what's fascinating is that you see things differently. And that's the way I've seen things as, this, very structured way to put things together, but that's just one way of looking at things and bringing other people in to think about it.
Mhm.
And then this whole thing, was usability. Now it's user experience. From your perspective, I mean, you're bringing people together. Is user experience, is that still the common denominator? Because you did say that that's what you're kind of classifying all the books that are created for you. So if
Mhm.
it is the common denominator, why do you think it's so important?
Well, I think what I learned from early days of helping define information architecture was like, as I think you said a moment ago, there's a lot of different people out there with different backgrounds, different skill sets, different tools who are often trying to work on ill-defined problem spaces that are new. So with IA in the 90s, early aughts, you had graphic designers and usability people and developers and psychologists and people like me and you, library science folks, who were all trying to work on big, messy digital information problems thanks to the web. And half the battle to solving those problems is getting all these different people to communicate, give them a common language, common frameworks, concepts, the types of things they need to actually be able to bring their various types of expertise and perspectives to bear together. You don't want to just have, design done by people from, just engineering. That's not going to be a very good outcome. Or just graphic design, also not going to be a very good outcome. These things have to be collaborative. And UX is really a continuation of that for me, in that it's a synthetic field. It's been basically bumping into and putting together all kinds of different pieces of wisdom, really, from all these different fields, whether it's psychology or theater or data science or marketing, or library science, whatever the case may be. We need a kind of shared bucket, if you will, so that we can work together. And I don't really care if you call it UX or something else. I just want there to be a common recognition that it's very hard to do the kind of work we do with a narrow skill set and a narrow perspective. And UX, the nice thing is um, it is so flexible and you can define it really the way you need to. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. In fact, I'm going to let you in on a secret. Um, I was, a lot of times I'm just like, I don't really care. Again, call it UX, call it something else. I don't feel a lot of loyalty, but I'm starting to really believe that that's a mistake when it comes to UX. I've been spending some time recently trying to figure out, is there a next best thing, like a next great thing, I should say, and what would it be called? And nothing is really out there as far as I can tell. But I do know that whatever UX is, it's only going to be needed more than ever. I believe that very strongly. I don't think we're going to be automated out of existence. In fact, I think the work we do is going to change in the face of AI, but that may be a good thing. I just don't. I cannot imagine a world where the kind of broad skill set that we bring to bear doesn't have value. I can imagine at times it doesn't have demand. And we're in one of those times now, but I've been around long enough to see this pendulum swing. It just swings faster and further than it ever has before. And I think that's what's going on right now. But I think it's time to reclaim UX. I think it's time for us to say, all right, we're ready to maybe take a new look at it, but it shouldn't go away. It's not dead. I think that's silly. Let's do that. Let's keep synthesizing. That's what we're about.
I totally agree. It's interesting because, like you said, you've been in this industry for a while and you've seen it kind of ebb and flow, and there's been a lot of adaptations. And then you also talked about I guess, it's probably more than 300 pounds, but 300-pound gorilla, artificial intelligence and how that's impacting everything. And I know we've got the Gardner hype cycle. There's always some new great shiny object that everyone's leaning toward, and currently that is artificial intelligence. And
Mhm.
I've had a lot of people call that different things as I've talked on this podcast. But I think you hit a good point about the synthesis and this kind of synthetic field, and that it's we're in this experience economy where that's what is going to be the differentiator. So I just don't see it going away. And that does bring me in. You mentioned it though. You talked about artificial intelligence. Is that the hype that no one can ignore right now, or is there something else you've seen with
Oh
bringing all these
gosh,
people together?
I really hope no one ignores it because doing so, remaining willfully ignorant of something that's powerful, doesn't mean it's not going to be wielded. It's going to be wielded, but it's going to be wielded by bad actors. And I like to think people in our world, or at least our community, tend to be good actors. They are people who have certain through lines in their practices that are often centered around being ethical, thinking of humans, not just being driven by short-term business decision making. So, yeah, we need to really kind of get a command of AI. And I mean, here it's the beginning of 2026 almost, and I think we're going to have 4 books out about using AI, which is risky because, any kind of book that's related to a technology has a risk of having a short half-life, but I think we really need it. I think we really need it. We're also going to be offering a number of workshops in this space. Again, I think it's just something people really need, not just for their own, economic success, career success, whatever, but because the world needs good people to know how to use that technology. I will say one other thing, though. We talk about AI. Again, here we're at the end of 2025. We've got one full day left. And I feel like at some point in the not too distant future, maybe a year from now, nobody's going to really use the term AI in a meaningful way. I feel like there are a lot of parallels in the industrial era to look at, like I always use this example, the telephone. The telephone was a radical, impactful technology at a point where probably, 130 years ago, whatever it was, people couldn't stop talking about it. I mean, think about it. If the phone was new to you, if you'd never heard of it before, and suddenly you could have a conversation with someone, through the ether, far, far away, man, that's amazing. And if the telephone had come out today, we'd be having conferences about it. We would be writing books about it. We'd be talking about it nonstop in podcasts or whatever. It's like one of those things. Like, and then it goes away in a way, or it just with the telephone, it just becomes part of the background. It's table stakes. It's just there, and we don't think about it that much. I think most technologies have that stage, and I don't. I think with AI, it's going to happen really quickly because everything is going to happen really quickly. So at some point, maybe we just don't use that term. I mean, the people I know that really know a lot about AI are already like, yeah, it's just this kind of stupid umbrella term for a whole bunch of things that don't necessarily have that much in common.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, what's interesting about that is you said it becomes part of what you do. But I think the thing that people struggle with is kind of reminds me a little bit of social media as well, where it's like I use it personally, but how do I apply it for business? And I think a
Hmm.
lot of what I've seen from a lot of the information and going to conferences is okay, I'm in this role. How do I apply this? And obviously, user experience is it's a big commodity, and we need to figure out how to wrap our arms around that and plus AI. And I love how you brought that, this idea of there could be bad actors out there, but we really want to instill that UX is flexible and we can use it in our day-to-day activities for productivity. And I love how you bring that up. Now, one thing this podcast we always try to hit on here, and since Lou, you've a lot of authors, a lot of people you've met when you are bringing them together. What are some common threads of advice that you would give them if they're thinking about either getting into this career or even just moving forward further down this path?
Yeah, well, I mean, I like to think that people in our field, whether they use that term UX or not, we're all basically trying to humanize technology. But we're pushing up against a challenge with technology all the time, which is that it becomes cheaper and faster and more powerful. And you use the word commodity. If someone is trying to navigate this field, especially if they're early on, um, they are always at risk of becoming commodified because the technology will do the simple, tedious work that most people who are fairly junior did manually in the past. So, I mean, we see this in UX research. There's so many aspects from, just from, both capturing and maybe doing an initial pass at combing through transcripts of interviews. That's a lot of work and a lot of time. And could a UX researcher's brain, which is very strong and very expensive, be allocated to doing more analysis and more synthesis? I think it's true in a lot of aspects of design. So, as we automate, a lot of the commodification will happen where people are working at the UI level or at the production level. And I think my advice would be to pan back. Don't think about experiences through the lens of the user interface as much as think about experiences through the lens of systems. So, if I was getting started today, I'd be a service designer, no doubt. I mean, looking at how things work at that much broader level of services over products, I think is really, really smart and really, really hard to automate. So that's my advice. Stay away from the interface. Don't be a commodity. Step back from the commodity. Do the things, whether it's service design or getting involved in operations or becoming an expert at the tools. Or, being a kind of high level researcher. Those are all areas where human brains are, I think, always going to be preferable to AI.
I love the systems thinking. I'm a huge fan of that too. And there's a lot of ways that when I'm working with a lot of product owners, designers, just people in the space, we always have to say, let's take a step back and look at how everything is connected. And that goes back to the ultimate user experience as well. And being able to dive into that and be able to use, like as you said, your skill set to better the experience, not only from the analytical side, but from that strategy side. And I
Mhm.
think that really is something as you keyed on throughout this time we've had together today, Lou, is this idea that we need to come together as a community. We need to share each other, share ideas with each other, and then learn from each other, and then step back and understand that this is a very flexible industry, and that if we can apply all these skill sets together, we can actually ultimately make product systems environments the most pleasurable, efficient experience that we can possibly aim for.
Well, let me leave you and your listeners with really two other pieces of information that might be relevant as we kind of start thinking about what's next for UX and what's next for people who do it. I had a really good conversation with one of the deans at this University of Michigan School of Information recently, and that's my alma mater. That's where I did my master's and my ABD, my all but dissertation. And they told me two things: one that I knew, and one that surprised the hell out of me. The thing I knew was that they had launched a undergraduate major in UX, and it was huge. It's like, I don't know, like 400 people. I mean, it's a big university, but I think like 400 people. And I was just thinking, with goodness, I hope those people can get jobs. Um, the thing that surprised me was they had, in the last few years, launched a UX minor. So not a, major, not a degree, but a minor. And they, I think, expected 50 the first year and got 150. And I think it's only been like 3 years, but it's the tied for the largest minor for undergrads at the University of Michigan, which is an enormous, enormous university. Undergrad minor, it's tied with entrepreneurship for the most common one there. So what does that tell you? Maybe we need to be careful not to see this as a profession and a professional identity. I think that those days are behind us. But the toolkit is super important for all those people going into public health and marketing and education and so on and so on and so on. So the toolkit over the profession, I think, is going to be a really important way to think about UX in the years to come.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know that, and that is amazing. And that's goes back to your initial point, which is this is a very synthetic field, and being able to take that toolkit and apply it wherever you are can really make everything just stronger.
Mhm.
And what I think is interesting is that with everything you're doing, books, conferences, bringing people together, that is going to continue to fuel the industry and be able to spark a lot of innovation. So, my hat's off to you, Lou, for everything that you've done, and
Oh, thank you.
thank you for sharing your wisdom with the audience today. And where can people find out more about you and everything that you do?
Oh gosh, I would just take a look at rosenfeldmedia.com. I have a bio there, but it's one of over 1,100 because we have a subscription platform with the free and gold tiers that makes available content from over 1,100 people, Mark, that including you, that we've worked with, whether it's recordings from our conferences, our free community sessions, of which we did, I think, 80 or 90 last year, our books, it's all there. And I'm just one of a lot of people. Again, we want to have different perspectives for a healthy field, and you will find them in the Rosenverse. So that's a place to find me, but more importantly, lots of other people with lots of other ideas and perspectives.
Thanks for being on the podcast, Lou. Best of luck to you.
Thank you, Mark.